Hello my friends, Mr. E here, reporting live for SLOPTIDE News Network, your most trusted source for all things Darktide, and of course, SLOP. And it is 6:34 a.m. and I am live on the scene bringing you patch 1.12.4 to Darktide, and this is a doozy of a deal, ladies and gentlemen. We have a really big patch here. Fatchark had been cooking since they've been away, and we are gonna break right into it. Now, I'm feeling pretty good as Mr. E today. Mr. Cynical is taking a vacation week now. This patch is hefty, and we're gonna see a lot of changes. So I'm gonna do my best to break it down for you. Might go a little bit long here, but hey, it's been a long time since we got some slop in the trough. Let's dig in. Warband. Today's patch comes with several fixes and tweaks. We have we've done some balance changes to the Vanguard enemies, decreasing their health, modified their block radius, and added a new way for you to stagger them. We've also taken a look at the blitzes available for the Skitarii class. Fingers crossed, guys, for that that voltaic shield emitter, whatever the fuck it's called, changes, and made some adjustments. And there's plenty of other things. It's being rolled out now, so by the time you're seeing this, and by the way, it's 6:35 a.m. I literally haven't been to sleep tonight because I wasted my entire night playing Minecraft. God damn it. It's time to get into some news. Okay, patch 1.24 notes. Okay, first of all, balance changes. Scab and Dreg Vanguard updates. Their health is being adjusted down. It's like 20% from 2125 to 1675. That's on Damnation and Auric, the harder difficulties. And that's like 20% for the Scab Vanguards. It's a little bit less for the Dreg Vanguards, more like 15% for them. But that's okay because like they didn't have the armor, right, that the Scabs have. So because they're unarmored, they were taking more damage already. So having less of a health reduction is probably going to be about the same. A blocking radius decrease from 120 to 100 degrees. My biggest issue with these guys is they feel like they're stupid fucking shields. They catch your attacks when they're like not even really near where they're supposed to be, and the shields are super frustrating. I think by far the worst thing about the Vanguards is that they completely cuck over like slow, powerful weapons. So if you are using the pickaxe, if you're using the power sword, if you're using the thunder hammer, God forbid, if you charge this thing up and you happen to dink the shield because it was just, a little bit wider than it looked like it was, you waste the entire attack. The Vanguard literally doesn't even get hurt like more than 5 damage by a fucking power thunderhammer attack if you hit them in the shield, which is ridiculous. So yeah, that should like break their arm and like send fragments of their fucking arm bone into their eye and kill them with that. They should not be like walking that shit off, but whatever. Anyway, so yeah. That's lowered. Hopefully that'll make them feel less jank. And they've lowered the amount of Vanguard enemies that are allowed to spawn concurrently in mission, mid, and end events. That's a good change because these enemies, right, they push you backwards. They push forward, and because they take so long to kill, and because you need to kind of like hit them over and over and over, they can push you back. And that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to fall back as they kind of push the charge. Can't really effectively do that when the room you're in with them is the event room and there's nowhere to go, so they at least figured that out. And they can now be staggered by pushing them 2 times back to back in rapid succession. This is a really cool change. It's the sort of change I wish they would do for lots of enemies in the game. It gives them sort of a unique counterplay. It gives them a sort of unique mechanic that you use on that enemy, rather than just like hitting them in the head over and over like every single other enemy in the game. Wouldn't it be interesting if there was direct counters to a lot of these elites and stuff, right? If a crusher, there was, when it did its overhead attack, there was a weak spot you were guaranteed to be able to hit if you could dodge that overhead and be positioned right in the right spot. What if the bulwark had a particular, like if you hit him in the toes a couple of times, he would guaranteed throw open his shield in the next attack, right? Allowing you a little bit of control over the enemy's tempo and a little bit of an extra way to express your skill and like manipulate these enemies. That would be really cool to see those sort of interactions with our melee characters. Okay, now we get some weapon and blessing updates, guys. The Mechanics Power Sword. This was a pretty big bug for the Mechanics Power Sword, the Mars Power Sword. This thing was not scaling on the finesse damage or the first shot damage off of its stats when you were using the empowered attacks. So basically the way this weapon works, if you are unfamiliar, is it has 6 charges at base, and then which gives you sort of a baseline power boost. But when you use a charge, it does a big empowered strike, which does a lot of damage, and it replaces whatever attack you were going to do in the chain normally, but it lowers the damage of the weapon at a baseline by using that charge. And so those empowered attacks, they should be really rewarding, right? Because they're lowering their power afterwards, but they weren't scaling properly. But this weapon was still hitting pretty hard, but it is a like strike down, one shot, stab the enemy in the head weapon. So losing finesse and first target was a big deal on those strikes. I can't wait to see how much damage this does. I haven't gone into the second to test all this stuff yet, but I will. I'll make a video on the power sword maybe tomorrow or the next day, because we need to see what this looks like now. They also changed the melee strength bonus scaling, so having full charges now, like your default state of affairs, will be plus 30% power, which is a lot, right? That's 30% power that you're going to have all the time, unless you use a charge, in which case it's going to go down by 6% each, or by 5% each. You have 6 charges total, right? So that's pretty dang good. So that's a nice little buff all around. They're also adding a new Light 5 diagonal Vanguard attack, a sweeping attack, sort of a slashing forward, and it chains from Light 4, and then it goes back into Light 4 after Light 5. So you go Light 4, Light 5, Light 4, Light 5, giving this weapon a little bit extra modicum of like horde clear or multi-target, because that was something a lot of players were saying it was lacking. And here's a really interesting change. Change the scaling of the mobility stat to provide an additional effective dodge when exactly 80%. So this makes this weapon unique among, I think, all weapons of the game right now. It's the only weapon where the mobility stat doesn't get the breakpoint for the extra dodge at 50%, it gets it at 80. So right now, most weapons in the game, actually I think all weapons except for this one, if they have that mobility stat, it's almost never worth it to put any points in them, because you only get an extra dodge count at the 50% mark. And if you think about it, if you have a fully leveled up weapon, you cannot have less than a 60% in any stat. It's not mathematically possible. So you would always have the full dodge count. And so therefore, most players on most weapons are just dumping the mobility stat. They say, who cares about 1% movement speed or sprint speed even? I got all my dodge counts, all I care about. Let's put some stuff into damage. But now, if you lose a dodge count by not having a maxed out mobility, there's actually an argument to be made there. I think that maybe they should take a look at doing this for some other weapons, and maybe give those sort of buffs to a lot of those less used sort of stats that just get dumped on every single weapon every single time. They increased the ranged hitbox for all attacks, which will probably feel nice. And what will really feel nice on this weapon is the move speed curve increase for all heavy windups and attacks. One of the worst things about this power sword is when you go to use your heavy attack, when you wind up, it slows you down to a fucking crawl. And there is a way to cancel this out, let skilled players know, which is like to slide during this animation, because you can then sort of preserve some of your speed, sort of the same way the Ogun can slide forward when he's chaining heavies with his slab shield. But it's so like unintuitive, and slowing your character down like that, it's not rewarded on the back end. It's not like the dueling sword where you slow down just a little bit for the thrust and then you go flying forward. You barely get any speed out of the backside of it, so it ends up making you feel super, super slow on the Skitarii, who's already a pretty slow class in terms of his mobility. So it'll be nice to not get completely slowed down to a crawl when we charge up our heavy attacks with this sword. So I'm very eager to play with this thing. We'll see how that goes tomorrow. Paired transonic blades, getting some changes here. They did fix the light swapping, so there's basically like a transonic blade macro, more or less. Strange that they are nerfing this macro, more or less. Yeah, this is what players were doing. They were macroing it up so they could spam the light one attack and then swap the weapon twice really quickly and then spam the light one attack again. It's the exact same thing that players do with the Demos Force Sword on the Psyker, to the tune of like tens of thousands of damage. Surprising though that they didn't change anything about the Demos Force Sword, but they noticed this one here and are targeting it directly. Whatever. They also did some changes to the cleave efficiency stat. I don't think this is going to matter because most players are going to continue dumping that cleave efficiency stat. And the crit chance scaling for the critical bonus is going from 0 to 8 to 0 to 10. So hey, a couple, like a little bit about 2% crit chance bonus on these swords. I got, sure, for free, why not? Then we got something interesting for our UI. They added a new alternative crosshair for melee weapons with a special mode switch. So, it's going to change your crosshair from like the dot that's normally enabled to a circle, is what they say down here. It's like, it's going to like have this like little circle when it's in the alternate fire mode, which applies to, you know, having the shovels in the bent mode, having the transonic blade be in the armor killing mode, the crowbar being in the blunt end mode, I think. Because you start with the blunt. Which one do you start with? The blunt side? I think you do. I start every day with a blunt. And then bone saw will be have that circle when you're in purple mode. But yeah, the interesting thing here, I don't know. This isn't exactly the most elegant way to go about it. Obviously, for the transonic blades, what these things really need is a visual tell on the weapon, and most players know that should just be the colors of the blade changing because it looks fucking cool. If you haven't got the mod, or you have the ability to get the mod that changes the transonic blade colors, it's pretty slick. It looks really cool to see it like shimmer and change from blue to red as you like whip the attack around. That's pretty awesome. And every other weapon here has a visual tell of what mode it's in, except for that one. It's nice to have the reticle change too at a glance, but I think it should be a visual thing as well. Anyway, down here, Mechanicus Power Sword and Arc Maul. This was the one that really irked me. It irked me so much. I had my favorite modder, T-Dops, make a mod specifically to target this, which is still a better solution than Fat Shark managed to come up with. The Mechanicus Power Sword and Arc Maul have one of the worst HUD designs for their charges I've ever seen. They decided that the charges needed to be represented by light gray squares on a gray background, and when they're not charged, it's less opacity, and when they are charged, it's white, and it's like everything is white and light gray and low opacity, and I can't tell what the fuck I'm looking at. It looked completely unfinished. I thought it was broken when I first saw it. I was like, is it missing textures or something? What the fuck is this? So I was like, yeah, my T-Dops, modded it, and you can change the colors of this shit now. You can make it like, morph between colors when each charge fills up. It can be like blue and purple. It's pretty cool. This, hopefully it has more increase to its contrast and opacity. If you're a colorblind player, you couldn't see this shit. You literally couldn't even fucking see it. I mean, it's already like hard to see for me, but like it's really bad if you're colorblind or like visual impaired. It's kind of fucked. So at least hopefully this will help a little bit. Then we have maybe one of my favorite changes that I've seen in a while to blessings in general, Decapitator. Now I recently made a build guide for the Hive Scum with the combat axe, and it uses the Decapitator blessing. This blessing is fucking peak. The problem with it though is Decapitator requires you to one-shot an enemy. It requires you to hit an enemy that has not had their health touched at all and kill them in one hit from 100 to 0. No, no hand holding from like hyper critical or whatever. But that's really hard in a game like Darktide. It would totally work in Vermintide, but in Darktide, there is so much stray extraneous damage going out. Think about it. The Recon Lasgun veteran in the back who's just going across the horde, one bullet hits the guy you're about to hit. Now you are not getting that buff at all. Fuck you. Or what kind of happened a lot on Hive Scum. If you're playing Hive Scum and you're using like the splash damage talent, or God forbid, anything that causes there to, like the bone saw, that causes there to be a little bit of toxin on the enemy before you actually kill them, it will steal the quote-unquote one-shot from you because you did one damage to them before the one-shot. So the change here is that you can now one-shot them at the 80% threshold instead. So they could be missing up to 20% of their HP, and then you can kill them from there. And that also, they'll say it down below, but you are required still to do the 100% damage. So it doesn't make it easier to get, but it makes it so it's more forgiving. They can take some chip damage on the front end. You'll still have to do the equivalent damage that would have killed them at 100%, but 80% here is going to be way better because now they'll have a little bit of extra damage from toxin or whatever, like one stack of flame that got on them from some bullshit. That won't be completely ruining your Decapitator stacking up. And there's some other massive buffs to Decapitator here, namely this one right here. The stacks are now going to decay one at a time instead of all at once. So previously it was an 8-second buff and you lose all of them. Stacks 5 times, you'd lose every single one if you didn't keep this up. And obviously, like if you get in a situation where the Flame Staff Psyker's just shooting all the shit around you, you ain't getting stacks, pal, so you're fucked. Now they decay one at a time, and they have reduced the duration from 8 seconds to 5 seconds, but it's a 5-stack buff, so if you have this thing stacked all the way up, you're lasting at least 20 seconds before you lose all those buffs, so you can definitely keep a way better uptime in combat with this. At the same time, they're going to lower the scaling from 24% per stack, which is a total of, what was that? 120 for 5 stacks, which is a lot, to 100% for the combat axe. The power falchion gets kind of fucked here. I don't know why they decided the power falchion needed to go down to 16% per stack. Whatever, I guess fuck you power falchion users, go back to the power sword. And then the bone saw going from 24 to 20. One thing I'm interested to see with the bone saw has problems with the one-shotting because his heavy one attack, the rip, the and you rip the bone saw out, that one oftentimes wouldn't trigger because it's like multiple hits. So maybe that is fixed. We'll test it tomorrow and we'll figure it out. And the Mechanics Power Sword got a big buff to its duration from 4 to 5, but it got way lowered in terms of its scaling here. But they did give the Mechanics Power Sword a lot of buffs on the other side. One-shotting with the Mechanics Power Sword, very easy to do because it's a one-shot, one kill sort of weapon. So probably fair, this thing is only going to be able to stack to, what would that be, 80%? That's still massive. Like 80% finesse is huge. Crits and headshots, nice. So yeah, as they said there, it's much more lenient to get this now. It's much more easy to keep this up full time because the buffs are more consistent. They're going to stay on your characters much longer, but you will get a less juicy maximal possible buff, and you still have to do the full 100% damage to get the trigger. And then down here, Machine Spirit Resurgent Weapon Blessing. This is the one on the Mechanicus Mars Power Sword where when you use a charged attack, if it gets a kill, it refunds a charge every X seconds. That was 3 seconds for, now it's 2.5. I guess. I never really found this necessary. The charges actually come back very fast on that sword, and I feel like the other blessings are so crazy, especially now that Decapitator is like gonna be so freaking easy to use with this thing. I think that might be a better choice. All right, it's time to get into the meat and potatoes here, guys. This Skitarii Blitzes, what you've all been waiting to hear. So let's start with the arc grenades here. Arc grenades, as I've been saying for a while, their number one problem is that they're inconsistent. You can throw them right next to enemies, and they're like, wow, glad that lightning didn't hit me. Just by pure happenstance, the grenades don't actually hit the enemies you wanted to murder with them, and that can kind of fuck things up for you. So they've taken a pass. They want these to all be sort of equal to each other, so they're going to give the arc grenades a use case here. They also said that they're changing the way all arcs on the Skitarii class work. So they're instead going to give a half-second debuff that shocks enemies and does the damage instead of an instant direct damage, and that is going to hopefully increase the damage per enemy compared to before. Don't know exactly why that would be the case, but that's what they say. So we'll take them at their face value here. Now we're also, I'm assuming these changes down here apply to the arc grenade and not to all arcs, but the arc jump range is going from 8 to 12, which is a big distance jump. The explosion radius of initial arcs is 8 to 10, and then it now generates 4% capacitance for each elite or specialist killed by the arc grenade, which is pretty cool, right? That is actually very interesting. So these things, because they already kind of prioritize elites and specialists due to their, arc nature being like, it's told to target those enemies and armored enemies especially, you can very easily kill at least 5, maybe 10 with this. And think about this, right? What if, because remember, you get 2% capacitance when you kill an elite or specialist by default, and you can take Flensing Strikes and get 5% for killing an elite or specialist. So you get 11% of your capacitance back per elite or specialist kill with an arc grenade. And if you throw this into a good pack of them, it could easily kill like 10 or even like 15, maybe even 20 if you've got good arcs on it. So yeah, that could definitely like bump your capacitance way back up super fast. This does still take grenade charges, but you get 4 of them. This honestly, it's basically like an instant battery recharge. Like, it'll give you a big bump of capacitance back quickly and have a direct effect. I think it might be pretty good, guys. I don't know. Let's get on here to see what service skulls have. We have a change to the Purgator and Medicae service skulls, going from 4 charges to 3. However, if you take both, you go to 5 charges. So you can use 5 flame skulls, Reginald. Yes, dude. It'll make all the difference. But you could also have 5 Medicae charges if you really wanted to, or mix and match at your own discretion. Not the most elegant solution that I was hoping for. I was really hoping that they would, allow you to have different controls for both of them, and they wouldn't share charges. But whatever, it's close enough. And then Purgator Service Call. I think they did a good job here of sort of, I think it makes both parties happy. my number one gripe with this weapon or with this thing is that it just didn't do anything for the first 10 seconds of deployment. It literally wouldn't even kill the weakest enemies in the game until 10 full seconds later, which is not allowed. Like, that's not allowed. That's just not good enough to be a thing, because when you need to throw down a blitz, you can die in way less than 10 seconds in Darktide, right? And a blitz needs to help you out in this situation. It also did nothing when enemies were like running through it, because they literally run through the entire radius of the thing and pick up like 3 stacks of fire, which legitimately does single-digit damage. So now every time it hits, it's going to apply 2 stacks. However, they're capping the stacks at 12, which I think is a fine compromise, because 16 stacks of fire is actually a lot of damage every tick, right? It's a couple hundred. 12 stacks is still pretty good, but it's not all that crazy, but you'll get there much faster. You're going to get there in half the time you would before. So you're going to spend a long time at 12 versus a short time at 12 and above up to 16. This is going to be a massive improvement to this skull, and it's going to make it much more useful just at any given time, because it's going to still hit that big wide area, but it's going to go into effect much quicker. And a lot of lower health enemies, they'll die from like, 8 stacks of fire. So yeah, it'll get them killed, and that's nice, right? So yeah, I think this is a good compromise here. It's definitely a buff for it, but it's not going to like do an overwhelming amount of damage. 12 stacks of fire is pretty good. It's comparable to what the Infernus Recon Lasgun can do, but it's not like, going to instantly erase Maulers or anything. Not that it ever did at 16 either. All right, new Spheric Command. It can only be used if you have the required capacitance available. This was a big bug with new Spheric. You could spam it when you're at 0%. That's definitely not okay. And yeah, fair enough that it needs to be nerfed, because new Spheric is already so fucking strong. And then, I'm gonna have to try out these, right? I'm gonna have to try out arc grenades. I'm gonna have to try out the new flame skull and see how that goes. And then we got integrated refraction emitter down here, guys. The integrated refraction emitter is now a charge-based ability. It does not use capacitance. It just uses charges. It just does its own thing. It doesn't have a grenade box. It just, every 75 seconds, you get a shield. That shield, if you're unaware what this did at a baseline, gives you 6 seconds of invulnerability to ranged attacks, and after, like, when you activate it and afterwards, you do a 5-meter, like, little pulse of electricity that electrifies enemies. So pretty good, right? Every 75 seconds, you get a 6-second thing where you can just kind of push through enemy range attacks, and you can trigger them back to back to back. You could also pick up the additional node that makes it last for 12 seconds, which I think probably a lot of people will do. They also buffed this node down here, the voltaic resistance sub node. You're guaranteed to release at least 1 arc. This is one where you had to be shot to get it to trigger, and they reduced the trigger requirements to 6 hits per additional arc. I'm assuming it still caps at 4, which means you need to hit 36 times. Wait, sorry. 18 times. That's way off. Yeah, 18 times in order to trigger that. Or maybe you'd have to hit the full 24. I don't know. But still way better than getting hit 40 times to trigger that. And those arcs, like, arcs are pretty dang good. Having the ability to, walk into enemy fire and pull a bunch of it and then do a guaranteed arc, up to 4 arcs, that could potentially be pretty good as like a siege breaker, a push forward sort of thing. I am interested to try this. I'm gonna miss my little servo skull buddy. He's been a faithful servant. Like, honestly, he's been there since day 1 of the Skitarii. It was pretty obvious he was the best blitz. Now I'm gonna have to experiment out. I'm gonna have to try these other things. I'm gonna have to try the flame skull, the integrated refraction emitter, the what is it? It's called voltaic grenade, arc grenade. Yeah, I'm gonna have to try these out. I'm actually very interested to see how this goes. I really kind of was wishing that this was made into a capacitance thing so you could actually use it instead of an ability, but this is still good too. I think that'll be pretty cool. All right, so that's everything we got for there, and then we've actually got some quality of life changes. Vanguards are now in the meat grinder. Awesome. Hey, how about adding bosses to the meat grinder for normal players? Because I think most players want to test their DPS against bosses. Don't know why we can't. Weird. You can order your operatives in the list from the operative selection menu. So yeah, I can't believe you couldn't do that before, but yeah, like, you were just stuck with the operatives in whatever order they were. It was bizarre. And now there is going to be a little arrow so you can move them up or down, so you can put your faves at the top, your absolute faves up there. And yeah, that's pretty cool. And then there's some stuff for expeditions that no one cares about. Fixes. All right, so there's a lot of fixes here. I had to go through this ahead of time and figure out what was like worth talking about, because there was, look, holy shit, right? So first of all, I'll say Fat Shark has been cooking on this. They seriously have worked, so kudos to them. They've done a fuck ton of work on this to get this amount of fixes done. Good job. But we need to get underway. I'm going to skip over a lot of these because a lot of them are very like nitty gritty, not something you're interested in. But down here, we got our first one that is something you probably noticed. The Veterans Demolition Stockpile buff was showing the wrong timing for grenade replenishment. So you would maybe see the grenade replenishment. It comes up, it's like, oh, 60 seconds to get a grenade. And the thing would be like, it's almost full, it's almost full. Boom, you should get a grenade. And then you wouldn't get a grenade and you'd be like, what the fuck? Well, the reason is because you were using crack grenades, and crack grenades have a 90-second cooldown now. And so it wasn't, they forgot to align that with that. So yeah, that's what's going on there. There's an issue with Advanced Combat Doctrines was not giving the right stacks for the Power Overload keystone. You're supposed to get 5 stacks of Power Overload when you have Power Drive. But it's weird because Advanced Combat Doctrines, it's not a ability that takes a charge on use. It only takes 25% of a charge, so it wasn't rewarding you appropriately. So now it rewards you based on how much you drained total, which is much better. Down here, they have a fix to ability charges not being given when their cooldowns ended. Yeah, all sorts of weird inconsistencies with like refunding when cooldowns have ended. Hopefully that fixes a lot of them. We also had Skitarii's Redline Keystone upgrade Advanced Power Management. This is the one where when you activate an ability, when you use a charge to cast an ability, whether it be Voltaic Emitter or Cord Claw, those are the two that I was working with, it would give you 5% strength per charge you had when you used it. So if you had 5 charges from Redline, you would get 25% strength for 10 seconds. This didn't work with Advanced Combat Doctrines because it didn't count as using the charge, because you only use 25% yet again. So this is going to be a really big buff to Advanced Combat Doctrines with Redline, because that means that when you activate it, you're going to get 25% strength for 10 seconds, which is a big deal. That's pretty cool. And then we are going to go down here to the next thing, which is massive, and it makes me retroactively right because, you know, listen guys, I was just predicting the future. I wasn't confused or wrong, I was just predicting the future. The Skitarii Redline Capacitor and Static Capacitor Drain abilities, they have this thing in them called it says just 25% multiplier to your capacitance generation. For the first month that the Skitarii was out, I was saying that that was applicable to all capacitance generation on the class and gushing about how cool that was. That was not the case. However, it was also bugged. It was supposed to be the case. So now these abilities, Redline Capacitors and Static Capacitor Drain, when you stack to 24 stacks, will give you 25% capacitance gains to everything, including base generation over time. So the extra 1% per second from that thingy bobby, the extra potentially, like, you know, what is it, 4.25% you get from critting over 5 seconds, the extra 2% you get from headshot kills, like all that extra 25%, that's going to be a fuck ton. Oh, and also from the Cord Claw's 25% refund, all that getting refunded with an extra 25% multiplier and all that. I think that this might have just leapfrogged Flensing. I think Flensing might need some help now. Not Flensing directly, but like maybe the path leading to Flensing, because Flensing, it was kind of like outcompeting them, but just barely, only when you are really popping off and killing a fuck ton of elites and specials, and that's really only happening at super high havoc. These are passively generating a fuck ton of capacitance now. You're going to have an incredible amount, because you were already getting, with even just the base generation, you're already getting 30% per minute. Now it's going to be like double that or more, and that's a fuck ton. That is really, really good. So that's a huge buff to those. Then we had a fix to where Advanced Combat Doctrines ends on Poxhounds. We fixed, oh man, they fixed the tape mag, guys. You know how, so what you could do with Gunsmith, which is on the Skitarii, is you could reload, let's say the arc rifle. It is a 4-stage reload, and the last stage is you slapping down the butt of the thing and like clicking it together and then being ready to fire. But if you interrupted the reload animation right before that last stage where you slap it down, you can put the gun away. It would reload itself in your backpack, because that's what the buff here that's called Gunsmith would do, is reload a percentage per second when it's not used. and then you'd pull it back out at full ammo, you shoot the entire mag, and when the next time you ran out of ammo, your character would just finish that previous reload. They'd do the last phase, they'd slap the butt and be ready to go. So you could do a taped mag swap and do 2 back-to-back mags with like almost no interruption. It was fucking goated. However, that's now gone. Unfortunately though, there's another class you could do this. I don't know if they fixed the overall bug, because it just says that this is an interrupted thing for Gunsmith, but go play Hivescum with Desperado, guys. Go reload your dual Uzis or whatever, right? Shoot your entire magazine on the dual Uzis, reload 3/4 of the reload, right? Don't finish it, do 3/4 of the reload, then activate your Desperado, and then you'll shoot your entire mag in Desperado, and then when you go to reload in Desperado, it'll be done. It'll reload instantly because you have staged that reload. You've done almost all of it ahead of time. So you've preloaded the reload basically, which is pretty cool. So I wonder if that's fixed there. Also, doesn't the Ogren have a staged reload? Like, doesn't he have a free reload with Point Blank Barrage? And I can't remember if the veteran. I don't think the veteran reloads his gun when he activates Execution Stance. But you gotta go try those out. Go see if those are still bugged, because that could be pretty fun. The Cord Claw ability could get stuck in this infinite loop. Great. We also had, oh god, guys, System Shock talent was not triggering from the Shock Maul electrocution effect on staggering hits. I thought this was intentional. I thought maybe it wasn't considered the right sort of shock, but this is a buff to the Shock Maul. The goated S tier Shock Maul, the best weapon on the Skitarii, of course. This weapon now is going to be applying 10% brittleness on basically every hit to every enemy that isn't a crusher, right? You're going to stagger them, and it's going to give you 10% brittleness on all these little jobber enemies all day long. That is crazy, crazy good, because the Shock Maul electrocutes on every staggering hit. If you go play RBDs or whatever, you'll notice every enemy is like zapping. Now it's going to be 10% brittleness plus on every freaking hit. That is a huge buff to the Shock Maul. Fuck yes. Mr. E posting only dubs used today. That's cool. All right, the arc grenades, yada yada. Slice and dice wasn't refreshing its duration. We're getting new stacks. The high FOV on ultra wide was making the Medicae servo skull appear as if it was like hovering right beside your left temple. They fixed that. They gave the fix to the servo skull. Blitz was getting interrupted. You could like cast to the Medicae servo skull and then interrupt it accidentally by like scrolling. It was bizarre. So hopefully fixing that. They are going to hide the Blitz ability icon if you have the servo skull, because if you have just the servo skull, you don't have a Blitz ability, right? You don't have the button to press. They are fixing it so the servo skull is now going to be displayed in the kill feed. So as I understand, or as I thought it was, I think that the servo skull itself was already displayed in the kill feed, like if it was getting kills directly. The problem was, and hopefully they fixed this, I'll have to test it, but hopefully they fixed it, but the burn stacks from the servo skull, especially when you had new spheric and stuff, the burn damage from those lasers and the kills from the burns was not being counted at all by the game. Even scoreboard and power DI didn't show that stuff. It was literally just not even on there at all. So if enemies died to the lingering burn from new spheric command or just regular shooting from the skull, it wouldn't be credited to your kills, it wouldn't be credited to the skull's kills, it wouldn't even show up on the tracker, it wouldn't even show up on the damage. So effectively, those new spheric commander guys out there who are doing Skitarii, they're doing even more damage than you think, because their skulls are doing a bunch of burn damage that's not being accounted for by the game. So that is now hopefully going to be tracked appropriately, so I can see how much I'm actually pumping. They'll also fix the health continuing to drain when Medicae servo skulls are doing their thing, right? So basically what could happen here was that, like, this could, like, more or less bleed your allies out unintentionally, whereas your teammates, if they res your ally, it pauses that timer. The skull didn't, and so you could, like, technically kind of grief by, like, making the servo skull say, oh, we're gonna go get him up, and then, like, having it get canceled. It just didn't need to do that, so that's nice. And then a really, really big fix for the Skitarii. The servo skull's lasers were getting blocked by all of your teammates' effects. So the bubble, the Psyker Pain, and also the Veteran Smoke Grenade, it couldn't shoot through them, which sucked. Because, like, yes, it makes sense that the Pox Gas grenades, it still probably can't shoot through those. But that's an enemy effect. But your team was actually cucking you. You couldn't play New Spheric Command like half the time if you had those on your team, especially smoke grenades. They're fucking massive. So it would just block one whole part of the level, and you'd use your capacitance to try and cast New Spheric Command, and it would just do nothing because it can't see. So that is fixed now. That's awesome. Then there also a little bit of fix to mutant and chaos spawn grabs. They weren't taking dodge linger times into account, which might help to explain some weird behavior I've been seeing there, where it's like, damn, I really feel like I would have dodged that mutant in a previous patch. Interesting. And right below that, fixed an issue where the puncture blessing could be triggered by hits caused by sources different from the secondary weapon, as long as the weapon was being wielded. 07 melee psychers. We all know what this means, right? This was something that was being done with the Horse Greatsword, the Moonlight Greatsword. You could throw out the Warp Shock Slash and then quickly swap and hold the bolt pistol out in your hand, and with the puncture blessing on it, and the Warp Shock Slash would apply the bleed effects as well. Unfortunately, Fat Shark has seen you're having fun out there, and that is not allowed. Right, and then down below this we get some stuff, yada yada. Fixed an issue where sprinting would be interrupted while pressing the wield input while having the servo skull or servo skull talents equipped. Yeah, so basically this also this was preventing you from doing the wield sort of macro sort of thing. You can spam the wield button for your primary weapon while you're holding an attack to hold the attack for longer while sprinting, but you couldn't do it on Skitarii when you had the basic servo skull or the extra medic and flame servo skull. Only with the basic, like upgraded regular servo skull, and also having regular grenades also fucked you too. So hopefully they fixed all of those, because yeah, it was everything except for the upgraded servo skull with new spheric, with or without new spheric, was prevented from doing that. I don't know why, but it was just very, very strange. So yeah, hopefully that is nice and cleaned up there, because that was very much annoying that I can't do my extendo sprint, and it also just like pressing your wield button would interrupt your sprint mid animation for no fucking reason. They fixed these particle misalignments, so the shock maul, arc maul, not just these weapons, but also the power maul for the Ogren. I think I also saw on the power sword and the thunder hammer. I think it was pretty much like all weapons with particles. They kind of like hover, not right on the weapon, but like up above the weapon, so you would like see them on your screen after like playing part of a game. Kind of interesting. So hopefully those are all fixed. And then we have anything else down here. Don't see anything. So much stuff for expeditions, so no one cares. And there you go. Okay, and we're on to everyone's favorite part. We gotta wrap up an awesome SLOPTIDE news with some awesome cosmetic fixes. Guys, the intracranial implant, they fixed the Hive Scumtellect hairstyle displays being distorted with that. They also got the Mark III Brute Iron Jaw Stainless. They got that beard displaying correctly, and the Penitence Type by Pressure Helmet, their eyebrows are now visible. Awesome. Epic fucking patch. Great job. That is all for today. We'll see you on the Morningstar. Hell yes. There are so many good changes here. This is the sort of change I want to see more of going forward. I know it's a lot of work here, but look, just make Fat Shark. Listen, I know that a lot of you guys, you know, maybe not the upper management, but like I know a lot of you guys like watch the content or whatever. All this obviously changing stuff for like the Skitarii, that's a lot of work. All these fixes, that's a lot of work. But if you make this sort of change, if you go to right here and you take this change to Decapitator and then the tweaks, you know, to like these couple weapons, if you just do like 2 weapon changes every single patch, that'd be a lot every single week, right? Just do like a couple of tweaks like that. Just make one blessing, give one blessing a revamp, because there's so many stinkers out there. Just get some of those blessings, make them, just give us a little bit of a change over time, because that would really help to shift the meta. If we could have, a blessing that no one has ever taken on this weapon, well, now it's quite a bit better. Maybe you should try using this. And then over the course of the whole year, you'd see 50 or so such changes. That'd be pretty freaking cool. And I think it would help the game to feel a little bit more dynamic, because right now we've been stuck playing with the same stuff for a very long time. Anyway, that's besides the point. Thank you guys for watching. Have a good rest of your day. I'm gonna try to catch some sleep, but we'll see. I may be too excited to go to sleep at this point. Anyway, have a good one, guys. Mr. out of here. Bye-bye.